Please welcome to the stage Simon Allen, Conference Co-Chair.
G'day everyone. It's G'day Simon. Yeah, we're friends now, come on. So good morning once again and welcome to the third day of SMM 2024. We've been made to feel very welcome here with that wonderful smoking ceremony on Sunday, the brilliant keynote presentations and the moving welcome to Noongar country on Monday morning. Where we are gathered this week is the place of my birth, a place I feel I belong, and I acknowledge the people who have been the custodians of this land for tens of thousands of years. As a field biologist, I've been fortunate enough to spend time in the likes of Valangara, Dambimangari, Bardijawi, Yaru, Murujuga and other sea country. And of course, if I were to welcome you to where my field biologist's heart truly lies, I would say Yandani Garadagudu, or welcome to the twin waters of Shark Bay. I'm very privileged to be able to tread these sands, and I'm grateful to all the First Nations people here this week. Amongst a host of great sessions later today, please consider the 11 a.m. session in the Bellevue Ballroom 1, which is Indigenous Collaboration in Marine Mammal Studies. Before we kick off the plenary proceedings today, a quick reminder to be kind and respectful in your interactions with one another. We're here to exchange knowledge and experiences, and we're here to do so in a safe and secure environment. Please keep that in mind. To seek support if you need it, please approach our diversity, equity and inclusion representatives, identified by the rainbow ribbons, or visit the registration desk on level 2. In other housekeeping, please remember to vote for your favourite presentations by rating them through the conference app. Session chairs, you know what to do. Please keep the presenters to time or give them the hippo. Do keep wandering through the exhibitor and poster hall for mingling opportunities, tasty treats, lunch options, specialty coffees. If somebody could save me a free donut today, that'd be awesome. Seriously, yesterday I was like, do you even know who I am? And the vendor said, no. Even with this. Also note that the tea and coffee break after the plenaries is only a half hour today. As a reminder to the students, tonight is your night. Even though this is included in your registration, please remember to register with the QR code as there is limited space. A late opportunity comes your way. Conference delegates can purchase prints of the beautiful conference artwork. Just check your conference app for more details after this session. So, without further ado, it's time for our first midweek plenary. Ellen Garland has contributed to the UN Environment Programme, CMS Animal Culture and Social Complexity Working Group, advocating for the integration of animal culture into international policy. Amen to that. She comes to us today from the University of St Andrews, and the title of her plenary is Culture in Wales, Transmission of a Complex Display. Over to you, Ellen.
All right, as this is probably never going to happen again, I'm going to take a selfie. Thank you for indulging me. All right. And shoes are coming off. Now you know how I roll. All right, so I'd like to start by thanking the organising committee, in particular Simon. Thank you so much for inviting me. This is a huge honour and a real privilege. Now, I work on animal communication and in particular cetacean vocal communication. So today, I actually really want to take you through my research journey, which actually started here in Australia. So, As a naive PhD student who thought island hopping around the South Pacific visiting collaborators on fieldwork sounded like fun, I stumbled into something amazing, and I haven't really stopped trying to work out what it does since. I'm of course referring to the song revolutions in the South Pacific. So today, I want to take you through the intricacies, the extent, and the underlying drivers of these patterns, which both continue to fascinate and frustrate me in equal measures. So today we're going to be talking about non-genetic inheritance, social learning, cultural evolution, and transmission. Now, culture can be defined very differently by different people. So that we're all on the same page here, I define culture in a very broad sense as the social learning of shared information or behaviors from conspecifics. We're learning something from somebody else. Now, I view these behavioral traditions or culture on a continuum from complex human traditions or culture down to very simple ones. And this is helpful to allow a comparative approach to be taken. Now, humans are really at one end of this continuum. Come on. Drink. There we go. I'm going to have to press much harder. So, obviously, I work on cetaceans, and they live in the marine environment. And they're mammals, so they share a mammalian heritage. But the evolutionary pressures exerted on them have been vastly different to those on land. But we're connected, and this makes them extremely relevant in any comparative analysis. So cetaceans show some of the most sophisticated and complex vocal and cultural behavior we know outside of humans. This includes learning, shared traditions, and gene culture coevolution. Now, baleen whales can sing like birds. So everything we've learned, or the theory or the experiments to understand animal displays, we apply to whale songs. So these whale songs are more simple than birds, but one species, the humpback whale, produces a song that may be more complex. Humpback whale song has all of the hallmarks of a sexually selected display, and it has been suggested it may act as an acoustic peacock tail. So humpbacks are baleen whales that have a global distribution. They spend the summer months feeding in polar areas. Each year, they undertake large migrations to their winter breeding grounds where they aggregate around tropical islands and banks to mate and give birth. They show site fidelity to these breeding locations and are more likely to return to the same place each year than migrate to another one. So this allows the recognition of a number of groups or populations throughout the world. The whales in blue here, they're the South Pacific whales, which I'm going to be talking about today. So humpback whales can maintain multiple independently evolving traditions within a population. Culture rules their lives. They show maternally transmitted site fidelity to breeding locations and migratory routes. They demonstrate the social transmission of feeding techniques within a population, and they show song culture through the slow evolutionary changes to the song within a population, and also the rapid, repeated, and regular transmission and replacement of song at the ocean basin scale. So it's only the males that are singing, and song functions in sexual selection, but it's still debated the exact audience that it's directed at. It may be for mate attraction or to mediate male-male social interactions, or potentially both, where it would act as a multi-message signal. What we do know is the song is highly structured, repetitive, long, and very stereotyped. It's also constantly evolving, constantly changing each year, and I say this makes my life hell. So song is structured in what we call a nested hierarchy. So the shortest sound to our ear is called a unit, And we name these how they sound, so moan, groan, bark, or croak, which only really works in English, as I've found out. So here is an example of a trumpet, and hopefully it will play. Victory is mine. Then we have a group of units which makes up a phrase. And if I'm also lucky, this will play. Excellent. So then a few similar phrases will make a theme, and then a few different themes comprise a song. And a few songs then make up a song session. So themes are sung in the same order and the same song is repeated many times. At the upper level of the display, different versions of this display with different themes are called song types. And we name these arbitrarily with color names, and I can't remember whether Mike or I came up with that. So songs are initially coded out by hand. Units are identified, the sequence of units are grouped into phrases, phrases into themes, and then the sequence of themes that make up a song. We then have a number of sequences, either of units that make up a phrase or phrases to make up the song. So for example, we have a bellows and 3 croaks making up a phrase, and then a sequence of phrases making up the blue song type. As humpback's song is highly stereotyped, the sequence of units or phrases is really important. And we can use sequence information to assess the differences in songs. So I spent a lot of time in my career refining and adapting these quantitative analysis techniques to turn our subjective classifications into a quantitative framework. So all of the song results I'm going to show you here today, which are represented in these simplified color-coded tables, these are underpinned by quantitative analyses. So within a population, all males are singing roughly the same song. So we have extremely strong cultural conformity within a population. But that song is also constantly changing from breeding season to breeding season. And all males make these changes to maintain that observed conformity. Now this would appear a bit of a paradox to have a display that is both the same and changing. So data indicates that at any point in time within a population, all males are singing the same version of this highly stereotyped display. As changes occur to the structure of the song, males rapidly incorporate these changes into their own display. Then as a whole, the song of the population moves forward in small to large steps, in evolutionary to revolutionary steps. At the upper extreme, we have song revolutions, where the entire song is replaced by a song that's introduced from a neighboring population. Now within an ocean basin, population songs are similar, but the similarity depends on the geographical distance among populations and also has a time transmission component to it. So in the South Pacific, where I work, there are 6 main breeding populations spread from the east coast of Australia across to French Polynesia. So after feeding in Antarctic waters, South Pacific humpbacks migrate north to their discrete breeding locations. Each population is genetically distinct. And photo ID studies show a high level of maternally driven site fidelity to breeding locations and occasional interchange among island groups. And of course, each population sings a song. So previous work on South Pacific song has described it over an 11-year period. Populations are arranged from west to east across the top and passed through to as present as I got during my PhD down the side. So each color represents a different song type, with similar colors representing the evolution of a song type. So blue through to light blue is one song lineage. If you are colorblind, please follow the QR code there to a black and white version of this table and just scroll down to the bottom of the page to be able to follow along. So let's look at East Australia first. You can see some similar colours and then some different revolutionary song types. But let's look out across the South Pacific. So you can see that song spreads east from East Australia across to French Polynesia with a 1 to 2 year delay. If we focus on the blue song type here, you can see it spreading in a stepwise fashion across the region. This was then replaced by the dark red song type, which also periodically spread across the region. So this dark red song replaced the current blue song in each step along the way. So we have this really dynamic picture of song evolution and cultural transmission across this big region. So these song revolutions are extraordinary. It's this feature, this behaviour, that makes humpback whale song so unique in the entire animal kingdom. An entire population, which can contain over 10,000 males, will rapidly change their entire display, which can last up to 20 minutes for one song. They will change this to a song that's been introduced from their neighbouring population. It's basically like changing your national anthem every 2 to 3 years to something that your neighbour's singing. And this makes no sense whatsoever. Birds definitely don't do this. In fact, the only other animal that makes these large and rapid changes at this vast scale are humans. So understanding all the extraordinary features of this display is clearly important. But understanding song revolutions is somewhat challenging. There are so many pieces to this ever-changing puzzle. Today, I'm going to focus on the basics. First, we need to identify locations when and where populations may come into contact, which should allow these songs to be shared. And I always say, ironically, for a potentially sexually selected signal, this is not going to be on the breeding grounds. Next, I want to find out how far a song revolution can spread. Where is the end of this vast vocal transmission network? I also really want to know why it only seems to be spreading east. Why east? And this is going to require us to take a step back and examine the differences between the northern and southern hemispheres. Finally, I'd really like to understand how humpbacks are actually learning these songs. How do they combine or hybridize these songs during revolutions? To try and figure out how they may learn such a complex display so rapidly. So let's focus on the first question, identifying locations when and where populations may come into contact to allow song sharing to occur. So for song transmission to occur, individuals must be in acoustic contact. They have to hear each other to learn that song. So song can be heard 10, 20 kilometres away. However, if you want high fidelity copying, an animal would need to be within about 10 kilometres to hear all of those sound units, as some of those higher frequency sounds do not transmit as far and are not usually audible at 20 kilometres. So song transmission is suggested to occur due to 4 different mechanisms. The first is song exchange on shared feeding grounds. So in the South Pacific, we have documented singing on a shared feeding ground, the Bellini Islands, and the presence of males from both the populations of New Caledonia and East Australia. So we were able to confirm that cultural exchange of song was happening between these 2 populations on a shared feeding ground. The second mechanism of song exchange is transmission on shared or partially shared migratory routes. Now, pinpointing locations of migratory overlap and sharing is rather difficult, given the majority of these migration routes are actually offshore. However, one of my previous PhD students, Victoria Warren, documented singing on a northerly shared migratory corridor, Cook Strait, New Zealand, where males from both the populations of New Caledonia and East Australia have been identified moving through. There we go. Through vocal matching, we were able to link singers in Cook Strait to the New Caledonian population and also potentially to East Australia. So we were able to confirm that cultural exchange of song between these populations was possible at this location as to whose song types were present. Now, a migratory stopover was also found at the Kermadec Islands, northeast of New Zealand, when the whales are on their southern migration. And this work was done by my master's student, Claire Owen. So to demonstrate this, each population is shown by a single whale, and they are color-coded by the songs they are singing at that location or combination of songs if more than one was present. They then migrate south, and we recorded them at the Kermadec Islands. The songs present can not only tell us what populations migrated through the area, but they demonstrate the availability of novel, revolutionary songs to whales from the east. There we go. This can then allow the spread of this novel green song type east. So on a shared migratory stopover, we documented a revolutionary song and active song learning through the presence of hybrid songs. We also documented song convergence, as these populations came back into acoustic contact after being isolated on those breeding grounds. That green song converged to a new single norm. And all of these mechanisms support the transmission of song east across the region. Song can also be shared through the third mechanism, where individuals visit a different breeding ground between season. You can see you switch. Now that whale would likely go back to their original natal breeding ground the next year, hopefully taking a new song with them. And the final mechanism is individuals moving between breeding grounds within that 3 to 4 month breeding season. Again, the whale would go back to their original natal breeding ground, hopefully taking a new song with them. So these final mechanisms are supported by mark recapture and satellite tagging studies demonstrating those whale movements, but we've yet to demonstrate them with song. Okay, so I've shown you examples of song transmission on the feeding grounds and song convergence and transmission on shared migratory corridors. Now we're going to focus on how far a song revolution can spread. Where do these song revolutions end? Okay, so songs spread exclusively east across the region. And it can spread from the West Australian population located in the Indian Ocean into the East Australian population in the South Pacific. From East Australia, it spreads across to French Polynesia. But the easterly extent of this cultural transmission is unknown. So how far does song revolution spread? The next major breeding ground that we have is located on the west coast of South America. So we wanted to know if song continues to spread east across the South Pacific to the breeding population located in Ecuador. So we compared 3 consecutive years of data between French Polynesia and Ecuador. And this work was done by my master's student, Josephine Schultz. All right, to understand connectivity at this vast scale, we need to take a step back. So we have the songs who are historically present across the region from 1998 through to 2008. And we know the more recent song types in French Polynesia from 2009 to 2015. So we have a complete time series of song types and from that population. We also know the song types that were present across the region in 2015. And this year, 2015, is going to represent the year before the current study, so we have an idea of what song types were present in the West. So, do songs continue spreading east from French Polynesia in the central South Pacific to Ecuador in the eastern South Pacific? Now, if we look at French Polynesia first, they're singing the blue song type. And then the green turns up, and the orange song type also turns up. It is the typical song mess I've come to expect from French Polynesia. So French Polynesia occasionally has failed song revolutions where a new song turns up, but then it doesn't take over. I did an entire postdoc trying to figure out why, and that only ranged more questions than answers, so yeah. Okay. But what about Ecuador, 8,000 kilometers away? What are they singing? Well, they have a completely different song in 2016 there and 2017. So this song doesn't match any that we saw in the West. In fact, I've never seen this song type before. It is completely different to the Western and Central South Pacific song. But what about 2018? Well, we recorded multiple blue song types. We hear the revolutionary song from the Western and Central South Pacific being sung on an Eastern South Pacific breeding ground located 8,000 kilometers away. Now, we suggest these songs are most likely shared on the summer feeding grounds, as French Polynesian whales are occasionally seen on the Antarctic Peninsula, which is the typical feeding grounds for Eastern South Pacific whales. Song is shared across the entire South Pacific Ocean basin. It continues moving in an easterly direction. So far, half of the globe is vocally connected as humpback whales learn and then pass on these novel song types. All right. So I've shown you the easterly extent of the song transmission network as far as we currently know. And I do not think that this is going to be the end of the story. Quite frankly, the chances of a full circumpolar song transmission are very much on the cards. For now, we're going to focus on why that song only seems to be spreading east. Why east? What is it about the setup of the transmission network in the Southern Hemisphere that promotes this? For this, we need to take a global perspective. So first, we need to examine the differences between these hemispheres, and then we can try and work out why it might only be going east. So we're zoomed out to a global scale. In the Southern Hemisphere populations, we see patterns of song evolution through copying errors and innovation that lead to smaller progressive changes to the song, and revolutions, the introduction and replacement of complete songs from a neighboring population. Whereas in the Northern Hemisphere populations, there is high song sharing within each ocean basin, and only revolutions have been discovered in the song. So we're seeing different song dynamics observed between these two hemispheres. But there's also differences in geography between these hemispheres. And this geography might be the reason that there are different transmission patterns between the northern and southern hemispheres. All right, this is a click fest, so we'll see if it works. In the northern hemisphere populations interact with most other populations within their ocean basin, but not outside. There are continents in the way preventing this movement or interaction between ocean basins, and also preventing song sharing. Whereas in our southern hemisphere populations, the populations are more spread out around Antarctica, and they typically interact with their direct neighboring populations, creating a chain. But also, importantly, this can be with populations from other ocean basins. And these occasional interactions between ocean basins is what we think may make song revolutions possible. But these large-scale patterns are really hard to study. But models can help us start to address what might be plausible. So we built a model. We modeled the southern hemisphere populations here as a circular chain of populations, and this is because we had empirical data for some of these populations. So by comparing patterns of song sharing resulting from our model with song sharing in that data set, we could fit our model and find the learning parameters that could lead to song evolutions and revolutions. So these included how precise agents should learn the songs and how much interaction there should be with neighboring populations. So first, we had to create the model. And just to give you a little idea of what this entailed, we modeled the 11 southern hemisphere populations with the same population sizes as the real populations. So we attempted to get as close to reality as we could with the model. And each individual in this sung a song. So this was represented as a string of themes. So we allowed mutation, changes to the song to simulate these normal processes of innovation that occurs with song. And each of these individuals had a song memory which went back 5 years. So it had all the songs it had sung in those previous 5 years in it. And with this song memory, individuals only learned novel songs, songs that they hadn't already sung in the previous year and that was stored in their song memory. But finally, we also included rare interactions between populations. So on the map, on the previous slides, you could see that all Southern Hemisphere populations feed around Antarctica. And there on the feeding grounds or during migration between breeding and feeding, those occasional interactions between whales from different populations to occur. And these interactions, this acoustic contact, allows songs to be shared between the populations. So in our model, we mirrored this by letting populations only interact with their direct western and eastern neighbors. And by doing this, we found a combination of high learning precision and rare interactions between those populations was sufficient to create patterns of both song evolution and song revolution. Yay, we now have a working song transmission model. But what are we actually going to test with it? So we hypothesize that differences in population size are why the song spreads from west to east, from large to small. Songs spread from the large West Australian population in the Indian Ocean and move eastwards through the smaller, and then smaller populations across the South Pacific. So to test whether differences in population size dictate the direction of revolutions, we tested 2 scenarios. In the first, we started the model at the end of whaling with each population set to their post-whaling sizes, and then we grew all populations to their 2015 estimated abundance. Again, this scenario gets as close to reality as we're going to get with a model. And in the second scenario, all populations were set to the same size at the start and end of that model. And this tests whether the relative differences in population sizes determines that direction of transmission. All right, here we compare the average amount of theme sharing among those populations. On the y-axis is year, with 0 representing the current year, and then the 10 years before that. On the x-axis here, we have the focal population, here with value 0, and the populations west, negative values, and east, positive values of that population averaged over the different years. You can see that within population, within year sharing is highest, and that sharing between the focal population and itself in the previous year is low. So in 1 year, the song of that population changed quite dramatically, possibly a revolution. But if you look up 1 and left, there is a higher amount of theme sharing with populations to the west of it in the previous year. And you can actually see a wave of theme sharing going back about 5 years. So this fading in theme sharing is a result of song changes due to song evolution, which is also happening alongside those revolutions. So songs spread east from one population to the next, and this occurred in 95% of the simulations where a revolution occurred. So this is mirroring what we see in real life, spreading from large to small, from west to east. But what happens if we remove these differences in population size? Well, the direction of revolutions is almost equally likely to run from east to west as west to east. Clearly, differences in population size do matter. So the circumpolar geography, which allows song sharing between ocean basins, combined with these population size differences, creates and maintains the transmission network that is required for revolutions to emerge and continue in the South Pacific and potentially the entire Southern Hemisphere. So I've shown you how the geography and population size interact to set up the potential for songs to spread east from these large to small populations. Now we're going to very briefly touch on song learning. How does an individual whale switch between song types when both are present? And how might they actually be learning these? So understanding how and why they change their songs in this way is kind of challenging. How does an individual whale switch between these song types when both are present, and how might they learn these? In essence, how does a whale go from singing this song type in all its amazing complexity to singing this new song type? How on earth are they doing this, and what are those learning processes involved? Well, we discovered a few hybrid songs, when a whale sings both old and new song types during a revolution. We're capturing a whale in the process of changing their song, so we caught them in the act. And we only have a handful of examples, and these are from different populations and revolutions. So they seem quite rare, which may suggest these changes actually happen quite rapidly. But these examples provide us with invaluable and unprecedented information on how songs are actually learnt. So what does a hybrid song look like? Well, on the left there, you have a spectrogram of the song, and on the right, we have the coded out sequence of phrases and themes. Now, each theme has been labeled with a number and is color-coded. So we analyze songs as that sequence of themes and as they're a string of labels. You can use common sequence analysis techniques to compare these songs. It's like comparing DNA sequences using string edit distances. So here is where the singer goes from singing one song type into another. But why here? Why not anywhere else in this entire song? So let's zoom in and hopefully listen. So this section is where the singer goes from singing current blue song themes to new revolutionary dark red song themes. And let's hopefully listen to theme 24 here. Yeah, you didn't think whales made that sound, did you? So now let's listen to that revolutionary theme 37A. You might be getting an idea on where I'm going to go with this. So let's listen to the transition when it goes from one into the other. So listen to all those ascending units. They sound pretty darn similar to me, don't you think? So we quantified what we heard. First, we identify all the places, so all the themes in the songs where singers switch between different song types. Basically, where do they jump from one into the other? And then we looked at how similar those unit arrangements were in each theme between those song types. Are there similar units and similar sounds in those themes? And yes, they very much are. So they cluster together on this dendrogram here when we undertook similarity analysis, but after analysing all of these hybrids from the different locations and song revolutions, we had a few clear patterns. We discovered rules how whales go about learning their song. We discovered what I called a switch when similar rule. So they find the theme that is the most similar in arrangement, and they group together on the dendrogram, and they either transition nicely from one into the other, as you just heard, or they replace that old theme with that new theme entirely. And then they continue through the new song themes in the correct order. So these transitional phrases, these points in the song are really important. We also found that they learn their song as themes, as segments of their display, learning verse by verse, theme by theme. And segmentation is also a feature of birdsong and how human infants acquire language. So this puts us in a bit of an exciting position for future research into the evolution of complex communication, and tentatively backing out of this entire statement, maybe into the origins of human language. So we've briefly covered how whales may learn a new song, but what continues to intrigue me and what I'm most interested in right now is why are they singing and why are they changing their songs? What is driving these large and rapid changes? And so I basically want to understand what the function of humpback whale song is and how sexual selection and cultural evolution interact in this complex display. Obviously, this is not an easy task. You need to have data on individual whales, genetics, epigenetics, hormones, and I'd love to tell you all about this, but I've basically ran out of time. And I can't fit everything in this talk, so you have to wait till the next conference when I will tell you all about what I'm doing. But to wrap up, humpback whale songs are socially learnt. They evolve through time through small changes to the units and themes, and also the entire song can be replaced through the introduction of a novel song from a neighbouring population. And this happens rapidly, repeatedly, and regularly at ocean basin scales. And they learn their song as themes, similar to how human infants acquire language. Finally, it's absolutely clear that culture is an important part of humpback whales and many cetacean lives. I need to thank all of my amazing collaborators, funders, and especially students. Thank you for making such an amazing, fantastic team. And to all of you who have supported me and inspired me to never give up. I certainly did not think I would ever be giving a plenary. But finally, I need to thank all of the members of the South Pacific Whale Research Consortium, past and present. You make these large-scale studies possible by sharing your data. Only together can we answer these big questions at such a large geographic scale. A huge thank you to the organisers for promoting South Pacific and Southern Hemisphere research. It's been an absolute honour and pleasure to talk about my work here today. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Ellen. That was fantastic. Conclusion, Western Australians are the trendsetters.
Go talk to Jenna.
We have about 4.5 minutes for questions. Go for it.
So I would like to request something. If there's any junior females, PhDs, postdocs who would like to ask a question, I would encourage you to come up to the mic.
Hello. That was a really great talk. Thanks for that. It strikes me, who are the creative animals who create these songs? Is a higher probability in the larger populations that there are more cool artists also?
Okay, it's hard to hear questions on the stage, so you're asking whether the West Australian ones are the creative artists? I would direct you to Jenna Williams, who's working on West and East Australian song. It would seem that they are the artist at this stage, but I think more work is being done. But I would, direct you to Jenna Williams, PhD student at UQ.
Thank you.
Hi, Ellen. My name is Anna. Absolutely fascinating talk. I'm fascinated with what you do. And I just have a question about I'm particularly interested in the connection of the populations and how there's this spread east with the songs. And you talked about the size of the populations and how that matches that movement from Western Australia all the way into the Ecuador. I was wondering if that applies as well, if you look at it from another side. So now if you look from the Ecuador all the way to Western Australia, then the size of the populations might not match that larger to smaller. I wanted to know your thoughts about that. Yeah, thank you.
Absolutely. So my favorite part of that slide is all models are wrong. So it seems that we did do a model where we basically let it rip for 500 years, and it would seem that as soon as it sort of started in that direction, it sort of kept on going like a steamroller in that direction. But I think we have differences in population sizes now, increasing, decreasing, and it really depends how they're interacting and how they're learning these songs, where on those feeding grounds, breeding grounds, migratory corridors, they're actually learning it, and how they're learning it. Do they need to hear multiple individuals? So I think it's sort of an all bets are off right now question, but yeah, I mean, Brazil is quite a large population, so I'm interested to see how that sort of sweeping through happens, and whether it's as soon as something starts and the direction is set, it's just going to keep going, or whether we're going to have blowback the other way.
Thank you.
Sorry, hi. So my question is, when there's this cross between different feeding grounds and breeding grounds, do you see a significant difference between age of the males? So who's actually setting the trend? Is it young or old, I guess?
Currently, we don't know, but watch this space.
Hi, Ellen. From a South African context in song, I obviously noticed that there's quite a gap in the middle of your world map. How do you feel that the South African or the Southern African and African songs are being sort of brought into this East change of song over time?
So I think each population and each overlap we need to examine separately. So some will be on feeding grounds, some on migratory corridors, but as we know that around Africa they're coming together and potentially feeding from west and east coasts coming together. And then it's sort of a stepwise process, and it may not happen every year, and we may pick it up at some point. So I think it just depends, and you have to examine it population by population comparison. Thanks, Erin.
Hi, thank you for a wonderful talk. I was wondering if there's differences in the complexity and the structure of songs that are learned through evolution versus songs that become revolution, and if we could get at that by comparing Northern Hemisphere with Southern Hemisphere.
You read my mind. Yeah, amazing work by Jenny Allen has looked at complexity in East Australia and New Caledonia and how that oscillates through time. Complexity seems to increase during these evolutionary periods and drops out and decreases when a new revolution comes through. So we have this big, amazing oscillating pattern. And so, yeah, I think looking at how Northern Hemisphere populations, how evolution using the same metric sort of behaves is really an interesting question.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, There's time for one more question.
Okay,
cool.
One more.
Should be a quick one, just a thought that I had. Is there any evidence to suggest that the females play any role in the evolution of song? So looking at sexual displays, do they produce any cues that might drive evolution?
Yeah, that's the $64 million question. So, I mean, different parts of the song, it may be a multi-message signal, so different parts may be directed at different audiences. We don't know yet, but it's something that is fascinating. And I spend a lot of time at night trying to work out what it is, and then in the day, and then I go back and forth, and yeah, that is my life. Thank you so much.
Please join me in thanking Ellen. Fantastic.
I'm running away.
Mauricio Cantor's group focuses on marine mammals and humans because of their remarkable behavioural diversity, learning capabilities and social complexity, not to mention the exciting fieldwork challenges that come with studying them. I feel you. It is my sincere pleasure to welcome Mauricio from Oregon State University to present Safeguarding Cultural Human-Dolphin Cooperative Fishing.
Thank you. Thanks for this kind introduction, Simon. And yeah, thanks for the organizing committee for inviting me here. Look at this. This is a dream. This is really nice. Might be the first time that I regret not having a phone because I like to take a selfie as well. Great idea. I might have to wear my glasses. Okay. So good morning, everyone. And my name is Mauricio Cantor. And it's truly an honor to stand before you today. I'm here to represent the work done by my colleagues and my friends on our collective efforts to understand and safeguard the last cooperative cultures between humans and cetaceans. So today we'll explore how these unique interactions help us fish for change, both literally as an effective foraging tactic and metaphorically as an inspiring model for community-driven conservation of biological and cultural diversity. So learned and shared. In its simplest form, this is the type of behavior that we call culture, as well explained by Ellen. We all learn by trial and error, but also by observing our social environment. We reuse information gleaned from others, sharing it among peers, and passing down across generations. So culture is so defined, not only defines us, but also represents our best local solutions to universal challenges. Finding food, avoiding death, reproducing, living a fulfilling life, those are challenges that we share with non-human animals, and those are challenges also overcome by non-human cultures. This conference is a testament that the idea of animal cultures continues to evolve from controversy to consensus. So we're here today and we can recognize that marine mammals also have cultures. And if culture is not limited to a single species, what follows is that behavior and knowledge can also be shared and learned across species. So when culture then transcends the species boundaries, it forms these unique bonds, the unique partnerships that help to bridge that insistent divide between animals and humans. Yet, these are rare partnerships. And they contrast sharply with our prevailing human cultures of today. Whether intentionally or not, our dominant cultures today promote exploitative, one-sided interactions with the natural world. Human-nature interactions are rarely beneficial to both sides, so humans tend to gain most of the benefits and nature bears most costs. Throughout history, our ability to learn as humans how to interact with nature has been key to our global ecological success, yes, but also to a global ecological crisis. But it hasn't been this way always. Many indigenous and local communities have long sustained cultural practices based on stewardship, embodying a cultural legacy of reciprocal interactions with nature. And a striking example is human-wildlife cooperation, where humans and wild animals socially learned how to work together for their mutual benefit. However, these century-old practices are now in decline. They're marginalized by the fast pace of modernity. So take the cooperative foraging between the Aboriginal peoples and orcas or dolphins here in Australia. It took more than necessity. It took generations of practice for humans and cetaceans to learn how to work together and combine their complementary skills in a way that facilitates access to their shared prey. However, they went functionally extinct faster than we could fully comprehend their ecological importance, at least from our biased Western science lenses. But the point is, the trend persists, and those last cases of human-wildlife cooperation are being now slowly replaced by yet one more human-wildlife conflict. Now, understanding the conditions under which human-nature interactions can flip between cooperation and conflict is critical if we're here to align human interests with environmental protection. So today we will investigate this delicate balance in one of those remaining cases, the cooperation between artisanal net casting fishers and dolphins. But first, we'll have a bigger challenge. If we are to conserve human cetacean cooperative cultures, we need people to care. And people care when they understand what they can lose. So we researchers first need to know, what do we actually lose when we lose those cultures? Do we just lose some cool behavior somewhere far away or some old-fashioned way of living? Or do we actually lose ecological functions, perhaps cultural traits that are holding the local ecosystem together? I'm here to split the answer in 3 parts. So first, let's just zoom in and see how cool this behavior is. We'll zoom in into one of the best study cases of human-dolphin cooperation to understand how the 2 species coordinate their behaviors and what they gain from it. This is necessary to understand what keeps their partnership going. Next, we'll focus on the social and ecological importance of their cooperation, looking at how it shapes population dynamics and may even impact local ecosystems. And this is necessary to motivate building resilience against environmental and behavioral changes. And then finally, we'll zoom out to ponder the lessons that we have learned at local scales and how we can extrapolate that to the global scales to help safeguard the last cultures of human-dolphin cooperation. So my story here starts in southern Brazil. So for over a century, resident lahills, bottlenose dolphins, have been interacting with artisanal net casting fishers to access the same resource, migratory mullets. Yes, dolphins herd the fish towards the coast, where fishers wait for specific cues that they learn to interpret as the right time to cast their nets. And in turn, dolphins will dive deep and for longer and echolocate to go after their share if the sound was up. No, there we go. Okay, so understanding the nuances of these interactions is more difficult than it looks because while the key elements are only 3, the bigger picture is quite rich. So for example, we need to know how the distribution of prey varies in space and time, how many fish is there, how's their migration and local abundance affected by environmental conditions and other fishing activities. For the fishers, we need to know how they synchronize their behavior with the dolphins and how synchrony affects their fishing success. But we also need to know who they are, how skilled each fisher is, how they learn the static, and how much they rely on dolphins for a living. And finally, for the dolphins, we need to understand how they invented the static in the first place and the benefits that they gain from interacting with humans, and how the existence of such interactions impacts their social and population dynamics. To address these questions, we first need to assess in real time how things work at that very fine scale that matters for this interaction. So we did this by recording the behavior of dolphins, fish, and humans simultaneously above and underwater. So we combined detailed observations of the interactions with photo ID, bioacoustics, drones to track the dolphins, environmental, sonar, and catch sampling to track the fish abundance, and yes, we even track humans. So with interviews, GPS, and heartbeat sensors, we measure the fisher's movement, decision-making, and physiology. So now this data allow us to understand how dolphins and fishers coordinate and communicate, and how effective they are at fishing together. Okay, so the first step is understanding how environmental conditions affect the prey, which in turn influences how likely predators are to interact. In the winter time, the mullet will migrate along the coast of Argentina and Brazil to spawn, and when conditions are suitable, they will enter estuaries, like our study site in Laguna in Brazil, so to feed and grow. So the mullets come in these unpredictable waves, and the first challenge is counting how many of them are there available at each moment for fishers and dolphins to catch. And again, doing this is much more difficult than it looks because the water is very murky, so it's impossible to see where the fish is. We solved this problem with a high-resolution sonar imaging system that projects acoustic energy and generates images, and from which our deep learning models learn how to count how many fish is there precisely at each moment. We then relate this count with wind, tide, and water conditions. They are known to influence their migration. Unlike us, the fishers still cannot see the fish, so they learn that without dolphins, it's very unlikely that they will catch anything. But by tracking them with GPS devices, it becomes clear that they respond strongly to the arrival of dolphins. So note that rapid movement from the beach to the water, to the edge of the canal, and the persistence there, represented by the kernel densities. So more dolphins in the area means more fishers in the water, and the y-axis there. And while this correlation suggests attraction to the same foraging spot, to really test if and how dolphins and fishers affect each other, on a natural experiment, we quantified their behavior, synchrony, and foraging success in 4 pseudo-treatments. So the first is your typical synchronous interaction, the one I showed you before. Dolphins approach, make a cue, fishers react, and cast their nets. But then there's 3 types of asynchronous interactions. When dolphins approach and make a cue, but fishers cast their nets at the wrong time or wrong place. And there's also cases where there's mismatch between their actions. The dolphins do not make a cue, but fishers cast a net, or the other way around. All right, but what is a cue? So a cue is this stereotypical dolphin behavior that triggers the net casting. And the most common one is a distinctive dive, where the dolphins suddenly arch their backs very close to the fishers, but there's other variations such as a head slap or a tail slap. Okay, so with all of this detailed data, we can now analyze how dolphins affect the fishers' foraging. And this sonar imaging reveals that dolphins increase the mullet availability at that very fine scale that matters for these fishers. In the next slides, I'll be presenting data from the synchronous interactions in red and all asynchronous interactions in all colors together. Okay? And the time in the x-axis is relative to the interaction, which will be represented by a vertical dashed line. So picture this. Migratory mullet, when they pass through the canal, they're out of reach for these net casting fishers fishing from shore. But with dolphins actively herding schools towards the fisher before giving a cue, they turn that area into a temporary high-quality patch. And this is indicated by the increase in mullet detections in our sonar in the y-axis after the cue, the dashed line. And by contrast, we don't see such a consistent increase in detections in any of those asynchronous interactions. Then by sitting at the beach, it's easy to quantify how much the fishers get from this. We can count, measure, weight their catch, and the message is very clear. Fishers are 10 times more likely to catch fish when following the dolphin's cues. Nearly all mullet caught by fishers come from synchronous interactions with the dolphins in the y-axis there. And this is almost independently of the environmental conditions for mullet availability in the x-axis. So again, we don't see that on the asynchronous interactions. And the point here is behavior synchrony is what's driving fisher success, which then begs the obvious question: what is in there for the dolphins? So if this is a cooperative hunting, the hypothesis goes that the fishers should obtain the same benefits, more fish. But then measuring the dolphins' foraging success is much trickier because, again, we cannot see what they catch under the murky water. But we can use the same trick that we did before, using a sonar to count the fish, but this time we can rely on the dolphin's own sonar and find out when they target mullet. When actively foraging, dolphins will switch from producing fewer clicks, echolocation clicks, into a burst of clicks when they are honing in on prey. So we measure when and how often they emit those terminal foraging buzzes as a proxy for their foraging success. And we found that dolphins produce disproportionately more of those terminal buzzes in the y-axis there when fishers cast their net in sync with their cue. And again, we don't see this increase in any of those asynchronous interactions. So just like on the fisher's side, our models predicts that foraging synchrony, it's what's driving the dolphin success. You may be thinking, yeah, buzzes indicate that they're going after fish, but this is not the same as catching fish. I know, I also don't sleep thinking about that. But if dolphins consistently forage this actively, only after the time it takes for the nets to sink and close over the fish, if you see like those 10 seconds after the dashed line there, then this is a pretty good indication that the dolphins do benefit. Otherwise, why would they keep this business for the past century if it didn't pay off? Okay, so next I'll show you some sonar images that provides additional evidence that the dolphins are indeed benefiting from interacting with nets. So what you're going to see, it's a sonar image. So just like a drone, it's a top-down view, and it's a sonar. So it looks like it works like a pregnancy exam, not only in the sense that it uses acoustic energy to generate images, but also in the sense that it's only the parents that can understand what's going on. So bear with me, squint your eyes, and I'll walk you through this. So here we see a large school of mullet passing by as the dolphin approaches from the top and gives a cue and dives. And then the fishers cast their nets. You see a round shade over there. The dolphins then target the fish that break away from the school and use the net as a barrier to push more fish inside. And the fishers report that they can feel the echolocation in their legs and also the dolphins messing with their nets in their hands. So, you know, a tightly coordinated fish school is that textbook example of defense against predators. But the nets, they disrupt that school by either breaking it or trapping or removing fish, thereby making it easier for dolphins to catch prey. Okay, to wrap up this session, let's just pull together all these hypothesized relationships that we've been talking into a path analysis. So we looked at how environmental conditions could influence mullet abundance, how dolphin presence could influence water conditions or by mullet availability, how fishers' presence could be influenced by the environmental cues that drive the mullets or by the dolphins themselves, and finally, how foraging success depends on the predators either working together or on the availability of mullet. And the statistically significant yellow paths and their effect size over there show that flood tides attract more dolphins, which in turn attract more fishers, leading to more cooperative interactions. And that increases their chances of catching prey more than just the abundance of mullet. So this first closer look at interaction shows us that behavior synchrony between the two predators is really crucial. Now let's turn into our long-term data to highlight that there's a lot of variation across all elements of the system. There's variation in the quality of the predators, and there's variation in the quantity of the resource that underpins their interactions. So when interviewing fishers and measuring their net casting, it becomes clear that some fishers are more experienced and perform better than others. And drone-based tracking shows us that larger nets cast closer to the dolphins lead to greater fishing success. And not all fishers can do that. We're now starting to relate that performance with variation in their physiological arousal. So by tracking the fishers' heartbeats, it's clear that not all of them are in the optimal states to react to the dolphin cue on time. And there's also variation on how fishers handle their competition for the chance to interact with dolphins. Some of them, they adopt different foraging strategies. So some will fish alone, while others will form social cooperative groups themselves, which shapes their social network. Some stay more stationary, while others move a lot, as shown by the GPS tracking. But a very cool preliminary finding is that by adopting the similar strategies, they can even synchronize their heartbeats. So this plot here illustrates heartbeat variability between two fishers, and the black arrows pointing to the right show heartbeat synchrony. And the synchrony in the low frequency domain, there in red, is linked to their alertness when fishing with dolphins together. Okay, there's also clear variation on the dolphin side. So some always cooperate, others eventually, and some never do. And the fishers recognize this and label them as the good, the lazy, and the bad dolphins. The good dolphins are better at herding fish towards fishers. They cue more often. They generate more successful catches. So they get names and become locally famous, like Caroba. Remember her name? She's the oldest female who has been cooperating in Laguna for about 50 years. Now, the not so good news is the variation on the prey availability. The regional mullet stock is in decline due to overfishing by the industrial fleet in the y-axis there. So these variations in predator skills and prey abundance are important because that's where the resilience of this cooperation relies on. And with a recent high population turnover among both dolphins and fishers, we've noticed fewer cooperative individuals on both sides of this interaction. Our 12-year data of both basin monitoring shows a decline in the frequency of cooperative interactions over time. So all of this suggests that behavior variation can translate into a lack of synchrony between the dolphin's actions and the fisher's reactions, therefore lowering their success. And of course, this can only get worse if the fish is indeed becoming scarcer. So now let's explore how these recent changes can threaten the persistence of this cooperation, but also how local behavior changes can help preserve it. But first, Let me explain why preserving this cooperation matters. Cooperative foraging matters for the dolphins because our market recapture modeling shows that working with fishers increases their survival probability into adulthood. And this cooperation used to shape their social lives into distinct social communities, which now has been dismantled because of the cooperation rates are declining. And cooperative foraging also matters for this humble fishing community because dolphins generate good food and good income, yes, but they also provide other immaterial non-ecosystem services such as leisure, cultural pride, a sense of community and belonging. And fishers are very well connected to these dolphins. As you can see, these connections go way beyond just business. However, should the payoffs of this cooperation decline, then both of them have to search for alternatives, right? And an obvious alternative for a fisher is to keep fishing by changing strategies, changing gears. And the problem here is all other fishing gears are much more harmful than the artisanal net casting fishers. So a recent interview campaign across the entire fishing community in Laguna reveals that if dolphins leave, net casting fishers may place drift gill nets. But the data from confiscated nets by the local police indicates that this tactic must be used in a much larger area than where they cooperate with the dolphins, those yellow dots and blue shades there. Now, the alternative for the dolphin is, like any other dolphin in the world, is go forage by yourself, but that would mean that they have to forage over larger areas, as the non-cooperative dolphins do. And you can see there's a conflict in there, right? So if both of them change strategies, this implies in high costs for both fishers and dolphins. Gill nets are locally illegal, and gill nets are harmful. They're now one of the main causes of dolphin mortality, and the bycatch rate in illegal drift netting is increasing recently, so much so that the local community is now getting word and publicly requesting intervention. So here's an art installation done by the community to remember the good cooperative dolphins. They're no longer with us. And 2 years ago, having to add caroba to that list was a very sad moment for the entire community. So if both predators are now changing strategies, we're left with a critical question. When will that mutually beneficial interaction flip into a mutually harmful one? And can we anticipate any tipping point to prevent dolphins and fishers to abandon their cultural fishing? So now these are some difficult questions to answer, but one thing to do, a place to start is using what we learn locally to try and make predictions. So with a solid and empirical understanding of the dynamics of this cooperation, we can parameterize mechanistic models to try and model how well the system can handle changes. So our model here explores different scenarios of mullet availability and how that influences the frequency of dolphin-fishery interactions, and then dolphin demographics in terms of survival, recruitment, and foraging, and finally how that changed the engagement and the artisanal net casting fishing. And then we can project the results into the trajectory of the dolphin population under various scenarios. So let's start with the worst case scenario where Trump gets elected, where the mullet stock crashes due to overfishing. And then fishers are quick to abandon the net casting, thereby promoting more drift netting that doubles the bycatch. We can also simulate the current scenario where the mullet stock declines, but slowly, more linearly, and so do the fishers' willingness to interact with the dolphins, and the best case scenario where everything remains steady. The resulting dolphin population trajectory over the next years are quite different. In the best case scenario, it would reach carrying capacity. Should the mullets keep declining as they are currently, cooperative dolphins might be buffered, but the bycatch will be especially hard on the non-cooperative dolphins because they range over larger areas. Now, should the mullet stock crash, then it's bad news for everyone. Both cooperative and non-cooperative dolphins are bycaught more often, and the cooperation is predicted to be extinct sooner over the next decades. So what's really happening here? Changing behavior can introduce many negative links, negative interactions in our system. It can turn traditional fishers into environmental outlaws, if you will. It can increase the mortality of dolphins and overexploit the local ecosystem. But overall, it means that the system can flip. This once stable system can flip from a positive interaction to a negative one. Is there anything that we can do to reverse this arrow? Or to put in the current context, to swing back from the far right to the left? You tell me. Again, thank you. Again, we can try and start locally. So reversing the mullet stock crash would take immense economic and political changes. But reverse the fishers' behavior might be more manageable. Still quite difficult, but more manageable. Under the worst case scenario now of mullet stock crash, one thing that can be done is investing in better law enforcement to remove the illegal nets to try and control the bycatch. Another thing is to add value to these traditional fisheries with incentives and premium prices to keep fishers cooperating with dolphins regardless of their catch rate. However, none of those actions alone are enough, and our model predicts that only when combining such top-down with the bottom-up actions into a more integrative approach is there when we can mirror the best-case scenario where the population remains stable. Now, we know only focusing on the few elements of the system and the few threats, it's a crude oversimplification of this wicked problem. While enforcing laws and incentivizing artisanal fishers' help, this approach misses the fact that fishers engage in other activities than illegal drift netting. He also misses the point that dolphins not only die of bycatch, there's contamination, there's boat strikes, there are natural causes. But importantly, this approach overlooks that this is not a three-species system. Fish, dolphins, and fishers are not alone in there, but part of a larger ecosystem. So in recognizing these caveats, we're now expanding our effort to turn this into a long-term research program that integrates ecological and economic aspects of the system. So we're taking a step back to look past the mechanics of the human-dolphin cooperation to assess its ecological importance for the entire food web. This is an ongoing work of a team of about 30 biologists, anthropologists, and mathematicians, and we're trying to track trophic interactions from algae to human to then build ecosystem models that will quantify the broader ecological value of the traditional fishery, and then how losing that yellow link over there could impact local ecological functions. We also center this around its key players, so to use a socio-ecological approach to formally recognize that humans are key components of this ecosystem. Then we can explicitly consider their actions, how their actions play a role in the sustainability of the ecosystem and or the lack thereof. One cannot really manage natural resources without trying to manage human behavior. So this last step is taking us way out of our comfort zone. We're now building bioeconomic models that combine the ecological data, so dolphin and fish stock dynamics, with human behavior data in terms of decision-making, harvest quotas, economic and cultural values. So our colleagues now have developed this multi-species and multi-fishing gear model to test various management scenarios, and it's quite encouraged. Their results support the idea that the optimal solution is to exclude gill nets from the area. So by doing that, the dolphin and the mullet population would increase by reducing bycatch and overfishing, that we know. But also the fisher per capita income would also increase while the labor effort would reduce. Therefore, the net value of the cooperative net casting fisher would increase as a whole, and we hope that will incentivize this over other fishing practices. However, to achieve this, the models also suggest that nearly 1,000 fishers will have to leave the system. So in theory, it makes sense to try and bring the fishing community back to this carrying capacity, but is it realistic? That I'm not so sure. But either way, we'll need alternatives to manage such a huge social cost. And while this has remained an exercise, we're still refining the models in terms of complexity and realism before trying to propose any actions. It already got us scratching our heads, but also excited to tackle bigger questions. So this, combined with everything that we learned thus far at the local scale in Laguna, puts us in a good position to scale up and try to tackle the same challenges on a global level. Sparse accounts in the literature have suggested net casting fishers and other different species of dolphins have learned to catch fish together over 4 continents. So today, 3 other cases remain in Brazil, India, and Myanmar, but we still lack some detailed data. And beyond the academic value of finding similarities that suggest that cultural fisheries have evolved independently across the globe, for centuries, these fisheries have allowed local populations of dolphins and of fishers to thrive. But in Brazil, again, our best data and best models keep raising worrying news. So cooperation can flip into a conflict in the next few years. Instead of just watching these partnerships dissolve and the unique cultures that they represent disappear, we do have a plan. So we'll replicate our fine-scale assessment and long-term monitoring from Laguna to describe these remaining systems and investigate first if the interactions between different ethnicities of fishers and species of dolphins are indeed mutually beneficial, and if they are driven by the same ecological conditions and exposed to the same local threats in different estuaries. So in other words, is there any convergent evolution, so to say, in this cooperative behavior and its vulnerability? Our work in Brazil thus far suggests that it can take more than a decade of effort to understand the changes in the systems, its resilience, and the threats that dolphins and fishers face. Another lesson learned from watching dolphins and fishers in Brazil is that big challenges like this require cooperation. So I'm very honored to cooperate with 4 teams of bright researchers from the Global South who are deeply connected within their local communities and have been championing this cause for years. And we do need all hands on deck because conserving such socio-ecological systems around human-wildlife cooperation is particularly challenging, because it requires not only safeguarding a suitable environment, but also a motivated human partner and a motivated wildlife partner, and each of which is a very difficult question. But none of this will work without conserving that compatible interspecies knowledge, that behavioral synchrony, that knowledge learned and shared between animals and humans, that culture that might be holding this whole system together over the past century. So in Brazil, we've been seeing recent pushes from the academic and the local society for the legal protection not only of the dolphins, but also of the dolphin-fisher cooperation as cultural heritage locally in Laguna and nationally. And by going global, our challenge will be to scale up this proposal to the international levels. And raising awareness from local to international scales about this rare phenomena is very important because our data so far suggests that acting now to preserve this knowledge can prevent these dolphins into falling into the same trap of negative fishing interactions. They're taking away other small dolphins like the vaquita. So in Laguna right now, there's only about 60 individuals. They're from a unique subspecies endemic to a small portion of South America. Disrupting that interaction, that cooperation with humans, would threaten not only as small pockets of genetic diversity, but also equally precious small pockets of cultural diversity. Human-dolphin cooperation, passed down for over a century, transcends individual lives. It's knowledge inherited by each new generation, not by genes, but by learning. It's woven into the cultural fabric of the humans and the dolphins. And yet, just because it's endured until now, it doesn't mean it will continue. So more than a plan, we actually need hope. Hope that the traditional knowledge required for dolphins and humans to work together will not be forgotten. And here's Geraldona, now the oldest female, a cooperative female from Brazil, with her newest calf, who will soon learn together with this 4-year-old little fisher following his dad's steps, that cooperating can be beneficial for everyone. Now, that's a powerful lesson because whether through privilege or ignorance, we became part of a system that prioritized human short-term gain over the expense of everything else. Most of what we learn to do in our daily lives are one-sided interactions with nature. We gain, they lose. Thus, conservation has often been framed as a choice to conserve or to develop, to modernize or to preserve. One change I'd like us to fish for is start seeing this as end questions. How can we thrive as human societies and protect the environment? How do we build cultures that feed people and protect the animals that we care about? So today we're lucky that we can still celebrate these rare cases where human-nature interactions are mutually beneficial. But our work in Brazil shows that these partnerships rest on a very delicate balance between costs and benefits. And that balance relies on shared learned knowledge between humans and wildlife. Maintaining this balance will require much more than fancy data sampling and fancy analysis. It will require us to care. To care enough to look beyond just the biology of the animals that we love so much, because conservation problems are at their heart human behavioral problems. And to care enough to involve rather than exclude people from this equation, because we cannot conserve anything biological or cultural without accounting for the broader social context. And that context, guess what? It's full of humans, and we're here to stay. So how do we bring humans and marine mammals to the same side of the fence? How do we use this diversity of humans' interests and perspective to create conservation solutions that are ecologically effective, economically feasible, and socially fair? Now, I don't claim to have any answers yet, but by working at the intersection of animal behavior and human dimensions, will put us in a good position to start making lasting impacts on animals and humans' lives. And protecting the diversity of cultures like this will benefit us all, because human-wildlife cooperation, although exceedingly rare, it's a powerful reminder of what is possible when we interact with nature in a more collaborative and respectful way. In a world where humans treat their environment as badly as they treat each other, these partnerships reminds us of a simple but vital lesson. By cooperating, we can all coexist. And with that, I'd like to thank all the institutions that support our vision and all the huge team of collaborators. None of those ideas are my own. They result from many researchers and fishers who have worked in the area for many years and care to share this knowledge with me, and I'm very honored and privileged to be sharing it with you today. This is truly a collaboration built over generations. So thank you all for welcoming our mission of document one of today's most fascinating behaviors and safeguard their benefits for tomorrow's humans and marine mammals. Thank you. This is nice. Thank you. How?
Alrighty, a little over time, but I think we've got room for some questions.
Maurício, em primeiro lugar, puta que o pariu, mano. Muito bom. Okay, so now in English. On most artisanal fisheries that I know, there is a competition between marine mammals and humans. I was seeing your humans there, and I was thinking how wonderful would be to put these stories or tell these stories in first person to other artisanal fisheries. So do you think it would be positive to bring these different visions together and make them talk?
Thank you, that's a wonderful question. The short answer is yes, absolutely. We've been trying to do this, and it requires a lot of effort. You know, as a trained ecologist or a behavior ecologist, you're trained to be removed from the system, away, not to interfere as an external observer. So slowly building those partnerships, those collaborations with the local fishers to get access to their knowledge, to learn from their perspective, which is obviously much more detailed and rich and accurate than the ones from our biased perspective. We've been trying to do this. We're now working in Laguna for our colleagues there for about more than 17 years intensively, and now building these other partnerships with other groups in the world, as I showed on the map there. This is the vision, this is the hope, this is their lives, and the decision to, you know, conserve this is their decision. I'm not a fisher, I don't depend on this myself, so we work with their vision, with what they want, what they have to teach us, and what they want to do, right? So thus far it looks like this is a good way forward, but yeah, we're getting there. And it does take time. Yeah, as beautifully said in the first plenary of this conference, those partnerships takes a lot of time, and we're just starting. Yeah. Thank you. Thanks, Reed.
Hey, Mauricio, thanks for the talk. I was curious about the examples in other places that you're going to be exploring.
Yes.
Do you know much about the similarity or differences, particularly in like the cues that the different dolphins are showing, the types of fishing techniques that they're using, things like that? Are there particular similarities or differences so far?
Thank you. That's a wonderful question. This is really I'm very motivated to look at those differences. What we know, at least in Brazil, the two sites are fairly close, about 200 kilometers apart, and they're quite different. The signals of the dolphins tend to be in the other site much more the head slap and tail slap, so it's more aerial behavior than that sudden deep dive. We are investigating whether this is just a cultural drift, so to say, or if the physical environment also plays a role. In Laguna is much deeper, so they can do that deep dive, and the other place is much shallower, so it looks like the dolphins might be hitting the head in the water to kind of hurt the fish with, slapping it. Similar, I don't know if you heard of the lobtail.
Oh, yeah, sorry, Mauricio, it's Jenny.
Yes, I know. I don't know if you heard. I don't.
Lobtail feeding, yeah.
I can teach you all of it. I know. So yeah, similar to that case. Yeah, so there are differences, probably a mixture of the cultural environment and the physical environment as well. And now in the other two places, in India, we're just starting this collaboration with, and some of them are here, which is really, really nice. I don't have my glasses, so I don't know where, but yeah, they can tell you how the cues different. And yeah, there's many similarities and slightly differences in the type of gear they use, slightly modifications. So we're really, really, really curious to see how to put all of this together into, and explain why we have dolphins and fishers and migratory mullet and estuaries everywhere, but why in those places, What is missing there? What is the magical ingredient? Maybe that behavioral synchrony, maybe the knowledge. So yeah, we're very excited to have the opportunity to look into these questions.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jenny.
Okay, the question is, can this model be explained by, it started off initially as an exploitive behavior where each species exploited the technology of the other, and because it was mutually reinforcing, it then became cooperative behavior.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's the best hypothesis we have so far. My intuition will be, if we could go back in time, is some clever humans realize, where's the fish? Well, there's a dolphin there, pretty active, so pretty much there, and start casting nets or trying to catch the fish there. And over time, you know, dolphins are pretty smart as well, so they learn how to take advantage of the others, of the humans' tools, so to say. And over time, that, you know, through reinforcement, as you said, this fine behavior coordination might be evolving. So yeah, I think in general, cooperative interactions tend to start from one trying to win over the other, but yeah, it is nice that it can evolve to something more mutually beneficial. But that's a great hypothesis. Difficult to test, but we keep dreaming about how.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Some conferences make you thinking more than others. And definitely this is a topic that made me thinking. But my question is, so there are places where these interactions are still occurring, and possibly many places where they disappear. Is there any value to investigate where these interactions were present for basically looking at the past to inspire the future?
Absolutely, beautifully said. Yes, we started looking at this first from a, just a systematic literature review to see where we have accounts, and there's quite a few. Well, the oldest one is by Pliny the Elder in 1st century, so quite back ago, when we didn't have, drones and sonars to describe that exactly, so it's hard to compare. But there are other accounts for sure. In similar places, as I said, there's similar estuaries, similar fishing practices, similar coastal dolphins. So we've been trying to do this, and the vision is maybe start with a habitat suitability analysis to see where they could occur, and then going to these places, and I think here in Australia it's a very rich place for this, to see what is missing there. I keep thinking that what we lost is actually the knowledge, and the knowledge might be, you can lose that magical, in our Venn diagram there, we can lose that area through many routes. You can, more easily we can lose one of the 3 species, dolphins, fish, or people, but we can just lose their mutual understanding, right? So as we abandon some of these oral traditions, and it's easy to disrupt these interactions. I think it's quite fascinating that we still have 3-4 cases remaining because all the odds are against them, right? It's much easier to imagine that there were plenty and now they got extinct. And understanding why will definitely puts us in a good position to see what we can do to keep them should dolphins and fishers want. I'm sure the mullets don't want, but yeah.
What a tragedy that Pliny the Elder didn't have drones. Please join me in thanking Mauricio for this fantastic talk.
Thank you. Thanks.